Hey, this is April, and this show, Set discusses psychedelics. It's intended for audiences 21 and over. Also, I am not a medical expert. If you are looking to engage with psychedelic substances, please consult your physician before doing so. Welcome back to the show. This is Microdosing for Midlife, week 4 of a 12-part series exploring how microdosing intersects with identity, nervous system change, and long-term growth, especially in midlife. I'm April Pride, your host and founder of Set. This series was originally written on my Substack, and now I'm adapting it for our podcast, walking you week by week through the exact 12-week protocol I followed inside Micropsych, Set's clinician-created microdosing program rooted in the neurobiology of change. Yep, there are biological reasons that make change difficult. So difficult that our minds often convince us to cling to predictability, even when we're ready to evolve. This series is about what happens when we gently interrupt those survival scripts. If you're new here, Micropsych isn't just about what you take. It's about how you reflect, regulate, and respond to what arises when you're working with psychedelic medicine. You can explore Micropsych at getsetset.com. And if you want to skip ahead in the series, subscribe to my Substack. I'll link to these resources in today's show notes. Before we begin, if this podcast has been meaningful to you, please take a moment to rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It truly helps more people find this work. And if you haven't listened to the first 3 weeks, I encourage you to start there, but you don't need to. Let's jump into week 4, vagus nerve and menopause intuition, how psilocybin restores body trust in midlife. A funny thing happens when you're focused on one topic. Everything seems relevant to that topic. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Dots are connected in ways that offer an opportunity to further inquiry, which, with today's post, I've seized upon. Ironically, today's post is about intuition, which is a mechanism to connect dots. Stay with me here as we investigate the vagus nerve menopause phenomenon. Menopause, hormones, and the vagus nerve, a personal reality check. Last month, I reunited with a woman I met in the fall of 2021 through a mutual friend. At that time, we were both celebrating our first Thanksgiving without our families. Different specifics, both in pain, neither mentioning our heartbreak. 3.5 years later, at the birthday party of same mutual friend, we caught up. She confided in me that she'd recently titrated fully off of her SSRI. I, too, think about transitioning off my prescribed meds because they're not intended to be a lifetime strategy, per doctor's orders. I'm not there yet, but I'm likely close. So what have you noticed? I asked without missing a beat. She replied, my intuition is back. And I cannot stop thinking about this. We hear about meds dulling parts of our lives that make us feel alive, libido, socializing, creativity. But I've never considered the impact of pharmaceuticals on our intuition. This is dot number 1. There's a growing discussion in psychiatry about emotional blunting on SSRIs. People feel less crushed by anxiety or depression, but also less access to subtle emotional and bodily cues, which is exactly where intuition tends to speak up first. Some work even suggests that serotonergic meds can dampen certain interoceptive processes, the brain's way of reading signals from the heart, gut, and lungs that underlie our sense of a, quote, gut feeling. If you've been following my work, then you know I am not anti-pharma. I remain grateful for all the ways medication has dulled the unwanted, unproductive, unsafe thoughts that infiltrated my life for decades. If intuition is the ability to understand immediately without conscious reasoning, and is sometimes explained as a gut feeling about the rightness or wrongness of a person, place, situation, temporal, episode, or object. Dot number 2, we are in the age of Aquarius, which is, according to astrologers, the period of humanity in which our intuition surpasses our data processing capabilities to evolve our species. To separate ourselves from machines, this is an era when humans focus on frequency rather than facts. We're vibe setters. Dot number 3, artificial intelligence. It took me longer to connect these three dots than I'd like to admit. All this is happening while I'm minding my business, which is researching midlife, menopause, and psilocybin. This research uncovers women's intuition is impacted by hormonal shifts. Dot number 4, and the topic of today's post. We now have solid data that perimenopause and menopause affect cognition and emotional processing. Studies show more brain fog, forgetfulness, and difficulty concentrating in midlife, especially around the transition, which changes how clearly we can access and trust our inner signals. By medicating our emotional complexity in midlife, are we sacrificing a time of supercharged intuition? Historically, this is the age when women become medicine keepers, seers, and counsel leaders. The archetype of the wise woman exists for a reason because intuition often explodes in midlife as hormones drop and perception shifts. In many indigenous and mythic traditions, menopause is seen as an initiation into wise woman or crone status. Women who no longer bleed are believed to retain their blood as power, becoming healers and spiritual authorities rather than problems to be managed. Contemporary archetypal work echoes this, framing menopause as a transition into deeper relational knowing rather than just a medical deficit. And yet, women are told to manage our discomfort, flatten the spikes and valleys. But I wonder two things. Are we medicating to manage not only our discomfort, but also the discomfort our emotional wellspring causes others? And what if our symptoms, punctuated by increased emotion and sensitivity, are actually signals calling us back into our bodies, calling us back to safety, for our own safety and for those we love? The evolution of intuition. Science suggests women's intuition isn't woo-woo, it's evolution. Women who could read subtle social cues were more likely to survive and raise their offspring. This ability evolved as a survival mechanism, which is why intuition often feels so primal and instinctual. Today, we'd call that threat detection and social cognition, the brain's ability to rapidly parse microexpressions, tone, and context, those same skills that once helped us avoid predators or unsafe tribe members now help us clock the weird vibe on a date or sense when a room is long before the facts line up. Fast forward beyond life in the cave to the 21st century. With indoor plumbing and access to fire on the ready, our requirements for survival have been redefined. But being unpartnered remains a factor that increases our vulnerability. The vagus nerve menopause disruption and how psilocybin helps. MRI scans show the female brain is wired for increased connectivity, making it uniquely equipped to process emotion and logic simultaneously. So why in midlife does that superpower somehow vanish? Hormonal shifts scramble the signals, and our nervous system starts glitching. And there's more. Many women experience brain fog, forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, and mood swings during menopause, during perimenopause and menopause. These cognitive shifts can impact decision-making and how we process information, indirectly influencing the clarity of our intuitive insights. Recent reviews back this up. Perimenopause is linked with measurable hits to verbal memory, attention, and processing speed. And imaging studies showed changes in frontal and temporal brain regions that track with those symptoms, even when women don't meet criteria for a mood disorder. Yet, it's not all doom and gloom. Some sources suggest that with age and freedom from certain distractions, like a monthly bleed, many women may become more attuned to their inner experiences and emotional world, leading to a deeper connection with their intuition. The introspective nature of menopause can heighten self-awareness and connection to inner wisdom. In many cultures, menopause is honored as a transition into a wisdom stage where older women, the crone, are valued for their intuition and guidance. It's a cultural perspective that recognizes heightened intuition during this life phase, and menopause can bring freedom from biological and societal pressures, allowing us to focus on what truly matters and hear those internal signals more clearly. Where menopause is treated as a sacred initiation rather than a pathology, Think Mayan or other indigenous traditions, women often report fewer symptoms and less distress, which hints at how story and culture can modulate the nervous system's response to this transition. Last week, I had the privilege of speaking with Tom Morgan, who coaches fintech executives, entrepreneurs, and other high-performing professionals through the leading edge. Disclosure, I am now a member of the leading edge. I first discovered Tom while reading Jules Evans' Ecstatic Integration Substack, specifically the post A Dark Night on Wall Street, where Tom recounts his 2-year battle with psychosis while residing in Manhattan, working in finance, welcoming his first child, and living the hero's journey. Tom and I are fundamentally aligned in our mission to help people connect with their intuition. He's hyper-aware of intuitive thinking and those who are, quote, tapped in. During our conversation, when I mentioned this series on microdosing and menopause, he immediately shared that the women in his group who've entered menopause have noted a rise in their intuition. It's a small sample size, but I trust Tom's expertise in this arena. I could see and sense his genuine fascination as he marveled at these women and the possibility that menopause might amplify intuitive abilities. His observation lines up with what some neuroscientists are starting to see. After an initial storm of hormonal and cognitive change, the brain can show signs of adaptation and recovery, hinting that midlife might be less about decline and more about reorganization, fertile ground for a different kind of knowing. Escaping our intuition. A Dark Night on Wall Street. In A Dark Night on Wall Street, Tom quoted Jung, "There's no greater burden a child can bear than the unlived life of a parent." Without considering the choices you'll need to make to unburden your child or children and yourself, how does this quote hit you intuitively? When I read this quote a decade ago, I was ruminating on the concept that by living my truth or truths, my children were one step closer to living their own. While I was weighing the carnage they might endure in my pursuit, I would escape into daydreams to avoid confronting inconvenient truths. Has a tendency to daydream was repeatedly acknowledged in my grade school report cards. Then, as I aged, this behavior was nonchalantly characterized as an overactive imagination. I now understand this lifelong pattern to be a trauma response. This epiphany didn't emerge from the week I spent at the Hoffman Institute 3 years ago, where we thoroughly investigated our patterns. Instead, it's thanks to the introspection that comes with this microdosing for menopause process and my recent conversation with Dr. Grace Blessed Hopley. You can find the full episode titled How Psilocybin Microdosing Supports Menopause, a Brain-Based Guide, on the SET podcast. In my post that kicked off this microdosing series, I relayed her definition of psychosis, and this was the first awareness I had that my daydreaming could be an indication that I was dangerously distracted. This tendency is how I had escaped the discomfort of my feelings long before substances and striving were also on the menu. Inviting escape is how we dismiss our intuition, allowing us to avoid confronting hard truths. Ungrounded. Anything but a new unknown or a known that is certain to inflict discomfort. Our intuition is always at work, for us or against us. The vagus nerve, our gut-brain axis. The lesson for week 4 of Micropsych is about embodiment and the role it plays in our ability to be fully present, mind and body. Microdosing quiets the noise, restores body-brain coherence, and makes it possible to tune in again, not just to thoughts, but to subtle physical signals, to reconnect with grounded thinking, rooted in what I feel to be true. This is the vagus nerve menopause phenomenon. Psychedelics promote embodiment by way of our gut-brain axis, the vagus nerve. High vagal tone is linked to our stress resilience, while low vagal tone is associated with conditions like depression, anxiety, and inflammation. Of all the scientific findings I've encountered in recent years, striving for high vagal tone is a highly effective way to improve our health outcomes. By measuring heart rate variability during and after the psychedelic experience, studies suggest that psychedelics can increase vagal tone. Heart rate variability is one of the main ways researchers estimate vagal tone in real time. Higher variability means a more flexible, responsive nervous system that can shift out of flight or fight more easily. a big deal for anyone living in a midlife stress sandwich. So high vagal tone equals resilience, solid digestion, stable mood, and libido. Low vagal tone, fight or flight, inflammation, other markers of stress. Estrogen and progesterone support healthy vagal tone, and when their levels plummet, we can find ourselves disconnected from our gut instincts. Menopause and trauma both compromise vagal tone, but psilocybin appears to help recalibrate this system, simultaneously enhancing our ability to sense what's happening inside, interoception, and reducing the brain's default mode network, the source of our inner critic. Imaging work shows that psilocybin decreases rigid connectivity in the default mode network, the self-story generator, and increases communication between networks involved in sensing the body and the external world. That combination maps pretty neatly into what people describe as getting out of my head and back into my body during and after a session. My greatest takeaway from working with Kendra Bloom on Set's microsite protocol is that the behaviors we adopt as a means of survival are hardwired from a young age, and they persist even as our circumstances and capabilities evolve. Psilocybin also increases neural flexibility, helping us unlearn chronic patterns such as jaw clenching, breath holding, and daydreaming. Researchers sometimes call psychedelics pro-plasticity agents because they temporarily boost the brain's capacity to rewire. What actually gets wired in depends on what we practice during that window. This is integration, new boundaries, new breath patterns, new ways of listening to our bodies. A quick check on my intention to move into the unknown with ease and courage. If my elbow is an indication of progress, I'm still operating with a high degree of resistance. But choosing to document my microdosing protocol is proof that my intuition is at the right frequency. Thank you for being here and for listening. If this episode resonated, I invite you to share it with someone you know who is navigating midlife and quietly asking bigger questions. So many women are recalibrating their relationship to identity, hormones, partnership, ambition, creativity, and sometimes microdosing becomes part of that conversation. Set is a trusted resource for medicine and education, grounded, structured, and integration forward. If you're looking for thoughtful guidance rather than noise, you'll find it at getsetset.com. Join me for the psychedelic salon that I host on the first Thursday of each month with Town Hall Seattle. You can attend in person here in Seattle, or you can live stream. And everything mentioned today is linked in the show notes. If you want full access to Microdosing for Midlife, you can subscribe to my Substack, aprilpride.substack.com. And if you haven't yet, please rate and review the podcast on Apple. It's the simplest way to support this work and help it reach the women who need it. Until next week, take care of yourself and those around you.